Hey guys, welcome to Beyond Sunday. Well, I should say welcome back. I'm here with Shay. Shay, how you doing?
I'm good. How are
Good.
you?
Good. Ready to continue the conversation?
Yeah.
Hey guys, before we dive into the conversation and discussion, check out this video. All right, guys, as we desire to take this conversation deeper beyond Sunday, Shay, why don't you share with us what's the big idea? What was the big idea from this last week?
Yeah. So, first Sunday in this new series where we're unpacking identity. And so the big idea for this week is called out by name and invited into this journey. So where were you at in the text?
We focused mainly on Isaiah 43 and did kind of look through the first 13 verses of that chapter. We did also go over to Luke and looked at the Jesus's baptism
Yeah.
and what is heard from the heavens. And so kind of calling out what we see in that in Jesus's baptism is everyone who's there is hearing like this is who Jesus is. This is his identity. This is God's son. And so using that and then diving into Isaiah 43 and what God is inviting or reminding his people of who he is and who they are and what he is doing for them and with them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Where
good.
were you at?
So we were in kind of some of the same places. Isaiah 43, we just took the first like 7 verses. And then yeah, we were in Luke with Jesus's baptism, kind of a little bit in Acts. But then we also went into, well, a different part of Luke, Luke 15, and the parable of the lost sheep. And then also John 10, where Jesus is talking about being the shepherd. Really focusing on, I think it's the third verse of that Isaiah 43. I think it's the third one. That idea of being called out by name. That was the thing I think for me, the overall uh emphasis for me was this realization that being part of this journey, or like part of following Jesus, like this isn't a numbers game for God. That's what struck me, I guess, as I was prepping for this. God's not just like casting this wide net and like, okay, if we can get this percentage of people to follow Jesus, then these are like we're doing well. There's actually this desire for individually, God's like, no, I want you to
Yeah.
follow me. And so the invitation is for everyone, but it's an individual, like invitation only kind of thing. And there's something about that. There's something about knowing like God doesn't want me to follow him because he wants a certain amount of people and needs like a certain percentage of people to follow him. He wants me to follow him because that's how he created me. And he desires for me like to to step into his family, because that's what I was created for. And so there's just something different that shifts in me when I recognize like part of my identity is actually this belonging into this. And so the invitation is specific to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And in verse 1, fear not, I have redeemed you, I have summoned you by name, you are mine. Like this ownership, this yeah, by name, this identity, that Jesus sees you and sees us is very specific, right? I do like that. This is not a numbers game. Like we'll just get this many and we'll be done. But the desire to be in relationship with His creation.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and we look like even the parable of the lost sheep, right, which we all like many of us are familiar with, but for me realizing like when Jesus tells that story, right? Like, okay, there's he leaves these 99 sheep to go get this one. I think there's something sometimes we think like, okay, that's because he wants a complete flock. And like we've got to make sure that all of the all my numbers are here. But actually I think it's more like, no, that sheep matters. And I think that's more of the point, is like it's not just like I want to have 100 sheep. It's like that sheep, that specific one matters. And there's something different in that, in that helps me understand better my identity in that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the going out. Like it doesn't mean the 99 don't matter as much, but
Right.
they're with Jesus, and there is one that is not,
Yeah.
or with the shepherd, and the one that is not with Jesus also matters. And so it's that pursuit that, like, I've called you by name, I've summoned you, you are mine. Um, and so that's also where for me, that's still highlighted for me, is this um we this invitation to, like, don't be afraid, do not fear, and trusting in God, that sometimes in the things of this world can be so uh unmanageable or
Yeah.
seemingly out of control, and you're like, well, I don't know where I sit in this. And just the ostrich effect, just go bury your head in the sand and pretend like it's not happening. But actually, I can stand confidently even in the chaos, that and that for within this scripture of Isaiah 43, talking about the waters, um that I'll be with you, and when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, the flames will not set you ablaze. This, um for me, speaking to the, like, I can stand firm, I don't have to bury my head in the sand, I can even the chaos swirls of the world, to the waters and the fire, right, the chaos
Yeah.
of the waters, the consuming nature of fire, that I can stand firm and confidently in the midst of what is swirling around, knowing that God is with me,
Yeah.
and before me, and protecting me, and all the things that is needed in that moment, that he's not absent.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and the connection there. So I don't, it was verse 1, not verse 3, but that do not be afraid comes right before. So don't be afraid because I have ransomed you. I've called you by name. And there's something too in that of like when you're talking about in the chaos and as the waters rise and whatever. So often part of the struggle in that, if our identity is not solid, then those things are scary. But this truth of like being called by name, that speaks into my identity. My identity is one who is called. And so there's something in that too of like we looked at yesterday, we talked about like here's a lot of things that maybe we've put into our pack, right? So we're using this series, this analogy of like getting ready for a journey, and how often we maybe are packing things that are unnecessary and not helpful when we go on a journey. In fact, I had Dave. Dave is one of the guys at our church who does all sorts of outdoor stuff. He's on search and rescue, so we did like a little interview at the beginning about like, Dave, does it actually matter what you put in your pack? And like, have you seen some crazy things that people have packed? But how often we have put things into our like identity pack that actually aren't true. But this is what people have said about me, or it's what I've picked up for myself, or it's what I do. Um, and if that's my identity, then yeah, when the chaos comes, those things all fall away because now people are saying different things, or what I thought I was good at or could do, I can't do anymore, or whatever. And so this idea, like what Isaiah speaks to, what the story of Jesus's baptism, and then we see it in Acts as the Holy Spirit shows up to these now like the Gentiles. Um, those truths of our identity, like created on purpose, made in his image, called by name, those don't change no matter what happens around us. And there's nothing I can do. Like I cannot change the fact I was created by God. That is like an innate part of my identity. And so
Yeah.
when the flames come and the waters rise and all of that, that doesn't change. But if my identity is in those other things, then yeah, that's a shifting place to be.
Right, because when the waters rise and the fire burns, it's like, what am I pulling out of my pack to be reminded of,
Right.
that helps me through that? Well, if
Right.
it's something that's not going to last, like, and I put my identity there, then I'm pulling something out that just isn't going to really help me. It's like, um I don't know, getting out in the water, and instead of pulling out a life preserver that helps me float and stay above the waters, but instead I'm pulling out a paperweight.
Right.
It's like, oh, that's not really gonna do any
Yeah.
good. So
Right.
I mean, it reminds me of we went on a hike as a, it was we did like 10 miles into this campsite, just a group of guys. And we got them all situated and what they were going to pack. And we get there to the camp, we're getting the fire going, getting our sleeping. Some had tents and some were just sleeping on the ground under a tarp and getting that all situated. And then one of the guys is like, "Oh, we can cook these over the fire," and he pulls out a roll, those summer sausage rolls that you like get at the holidays. I mean, you get them anytime,
Oh,
but
yeah.
that's typically when they're around.
A
Aren't those
big,
things like 5 pounds or 2.5 pounds?
like,
Or
yes.
they're huge. And there's 8 of us. There's 8 of us guys, and he pulls out one and he goes, "Yeah, we could just cut these up and warm up. You're already cooked, so you can just warm them up over the fire or whatever." And we're like, "Okay." And he goes, "And for later," and he pulls out another one.
Oh,
And I was like, "You pack this?" We're here for we I think we were there for 3 nights. We were there or 2 nights, 3 days, whatever. Not enough to eat a full thing of that summer sausage. That is
but
excessive.
yeah.
And it's like what? And so the other guy who was leading with me, we're like, "What? How heavy's your pack been?" He goes, "Oh, it's been really heavy, but now I'm hoping to eat all of this so I don't have to pack it back out." And we're like, "Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
terrible."
Yeah.
And so but by the time we left, he did not. We did not eat the second one, and he just threw it in the fire to burn up. Do you know how long it takes summer sausage to burn in a fire?
I can imagine. You guys couldn't help a buddy out and eat some of that for him?
Right.
Dang.
That we ate a lot of summer sausage, but that was just like ridiculous. Like in the things that we decide to take into our lives, that's the visual that comes to mind. Sometimes we're
Yeah.
like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. We'll all love, I could share this. We'll all love to have that. But then we get there and you're like, what are you doing? Why would you carry that in here?
Right.
And we attach things like that to ourselves. They're like, yeah, this is who I am. This makes me
Yeah.
up. This is my identity. And you're like, no, I
It's
don't think
not.
so.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the heart of it or the thing behind the thing. I
Yeah.
don't think that's the truth. You've been carrying this with you for
Yeah.
so long. How heavy has that been?
Right. Well, and sometimes we put so many things into our pack or whatever that actually there isn't room then even for the truth. So not just like why have you been carrying that? That's not going to help you. But then sometimes we don't have the things we do need. Like I so I used a number of different illustrations yesterday and didn't think of this one till afterwards, of course. Um as I was talking with
Typically when the
Nikki,
best ones come.
I know, I was like, dang it. But Andy, so Andy, our worship leader, this was years ago, but we went to like the Christians Musicians Summit. We used to go every year. And so one year we show up and you like take all these different classes and courses and whatever, right? And everybody who brings an instrument that you can carry with you brings it. So there's hundreds of guitars at this thing. Everybody's got that. So we get there and he gets his guitar case out of the back of the car and like we're like, okay, we go in and sit in like our first thing and they're supposed to like use their guitars for whatever. Well, he opens his case and it's full of food, like packed full of like sandwiches, like fruit. I don't even know all this food. No guitar, where at all. And he was like, "Well, we're not going to be hungry." I'm like, "Okay, so that's great, but you don't have your guitar. Like you actually need your guitar to do the things." And so it was really funny and classic Andy, but
Yeah.
analogy wise, like how often, yeah, if I've spent so much time with these other things, these other identities that I've put on, it's also easy to kind of forget actually the truth. And so in those moments when the waters rise and the fire comes, and that's the other thing we talked about, like uh, what's the first thing that comes to my mind when someone asks me who I am, right? So like you meet somebody for the first time and they're like, "Oh, tell me a little bit about yourself. Who are you?" And we tend to lead with the shining like here, here's the things I do or like I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a pastor, I like to play music, I like to go outside, whatever. And those things aren't untrue and they're not bad. Um but they don't get to the heart of who I am. And so we talked about like, okay, well, so my actual identity, like made in the image of God, whatever, which we're probably not going to lead with that when we first meet somebody. That's super weird. But I wonder how often that's what actually comes into my mind because typically, I think for a lot of us, like we may like, yeah, well, I'm a mom. And then in my mind, I'm like, and I'm not always great at that. Or
Mm.
I'm a wife and I got in an argument with my husband last night. Or I'm a pastor and I don't know if I'm qualified for that. Like those are the things that pop into our mind.
Yeah.
And so what would it look like if the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of my identity is like, yeah, I'm the one Jesus loves, right? So
Yeah.
John
Called my
describes
name.
himself that
Yeah.
way, like
Yeah.
I'm the one Jesus loves.
Yeah,
Um,
because it's with all those other things, there's a measure of doubt that can be inserted with a question.
yeah.
But when it's I am I am God's son, dearly loved,
Yeah.
beloved, his creation. I
It,
am,
I bring him joy. That's the other thing God
yeah,
says to Jesus. This is my beloved son. He brings me glory. He brings me joy. Like,
yeah. That then there's not I guess there can be, but it's not coming from God. It's maybe coming from us. Like it might be a measure of doubt that gets inserted with a question, but it is not a question that God's asking,
right,
or even putting upon us. It's one
right.
of, this is who He says I am,
Yep.
because He is God. And that's
Yeah.
where I came to that, like, we are His witnesses that He is God. And for his glory and all His works and everything that describes and shows who that He is God. But also I carry His image
Right.
with me, and
Yeah.
I am bearing that to those around me. And so, yeah, I may not enter into a conversation and that I'm God's beloved, but intuitively within me,
Yeah.
is that what comes out? Is it
Right.
like I walk into or in a place and have conversation, and I'm not questioning my identity.
Yeah.
I may not be good at certain things that I do or I'm a part of, or roles that I have, but I am not questioning my identity as a son of God.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I guess that's the other thing is that we identity is such a weird thing because yeah, we spend a whole lot more time thinking about our identity than the people around us. And yet, so much of our thinking of our identity is because we care about what the people around us think, right? So, like, I want to present this identity, but people aren't necessarily even caring about that as much as I think they are. So, like, there was this experiment that somebody did. They took like 10 volunteers, they brought them into this space, they put them in these tiny cubicles, no windows, no mirrors. And then they had like professional makeup artists come in and put like horrible scars on their cheeks. And the experiment was like, okay, you're gonna have this like horrid, nasty scar on your face, and you're gonna go out into public and see if people treat you differently. And so they put this on everybody's cheek, and then they had like a little handheld mirror. They showed the scar to the people. And then right before they sent them out, they were like, okay, we need to put a little like, I don't know, setting powder or whatever on your thing. But what they actually did was wipe them off. So all these 10 volunteers go out into like public spaces thinking they have these horrible scars on their face and they're supposed to see how people treat them. But actually, they don't. It's been completely wiped off. All 10 of them come back and report the same thing. People were super mean and nasty to me. People totally treated me different. They kept staring at my scar. And then they're like, well, you don't actually have that there. And so then how often, like for me, was like, how often am I showing up somewhere thinking people are like, oh, she's X, Y, and Z, because that's an identity I've put on myself. And nobody's actually even thinking that, but that's how I'm showing up.
Yeah.
Um, like instead of stepping in, and the first thing I think about myself is I was created by God, I am loved by God, like those truths that don't change.
Yeah. Yeah. And that He finds joy in my presence and in who I am and how He
Yeah.
created me.
He
I
delights.
bring Him, yeah, He delights in me. I bring Him joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not, and oh, that's the other thing. Like when Jesus is baptized, like that's before he's really done a whole lot of like super things that we would consider remarkable, right? Like God says, this is my son, my beloved son, who I'm well pleased or in whom I find great joy,
Yeah.
whatever the translation. Um, He has not like healed a bunch of people. He hasn't raised Lazarus. He hasn't fed 5,000. Like his list of like remarkable things is short at that point, which I think is so beautiful because God's like, no, I love him because he's my son.
Yes. Yeah, not just for what he will do, though he's here to
Right.
do something and obediently so, but I love him,
Right.
and in the same way he loves us.
Yeah.
And that's also in coming back to Isaiah 43, that sense of calling, and this one's for Israel, right? And this word of here's who you are and who God is. But this um in verse 5, do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bring your children from the east and gather them from the west. I will say to the north, give them up. I will say to the south, do not hold them back. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Everyone who is called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made, this like come home,
Mhm.
return to me, kind of the prodigal son, or the sheep that's far off from the 99. That it's like I'm
Yeah.
Jesus in the sheep and the 99. Jesus is going to get that one. The prodigal son is returning to the father, who is running out to meet
Yeah.
his son coming. And in this way, in Isaiah 43 and verse 5 is like, I am, God is the one bringing from the enemies from the north, which would be
Yeah.
Assyria, from the enemies from the south, which would be Egypt, from those they're from the east and from their west, where they're Israel's packed in there among enemies, those who would want to harm them, or take them away in exile. God is bringing you back, is
Yeah.
bringing us back home, and that invitation to come back, whatever it is, from things that we've strayed from, things that we've gone off, things that we've attached to ourselves that are not us. As
Yeah.
like I'm coming to get you.
Yeah.
I'm coming to bring you back
Yeah.
into my presence and into my family.
Yeah. And you specifically, that's the like that's the other piece because there I guess I think we were saying earlier, but like it's just not a numbers game for God. So yes, like there's this broad invitation for all of humanity, like all of humanity created in the image of God, loved by God. That is a truth of everyone's identity. And the invitation is broad and the invitation is for everyone because of what Jesus did on the cross. But it's also a very specific like invitation. Like he desires you to come back home.
Yeah.
And so in that language, and that I don't know, maybe it's just in my own brain, but there's something specific, like the difference between like an open invite to a party, anybody's welcome, you can show up, versus if I get a hand like delivered name specific invitation, you are wanted at this place, not just because it's open and everybody's wanted, but because your presence is desired in this place, and there's something different about that. And that's the kind of invitation God is offering, this specific like, I made you, I want you to be in relationship with me, I want you to be in partnership with me. There's something different about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the open house, while you're also getting a personal invite.
Yeah.
Come with me.
Yeah.
You are welcome here, while also knowing that the house is wide open for
Right.
anybody else to show up, but
Right.
it's still, I get a personal invitation.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's the kingdom of God.
Yeah. So
It's
good.
good. It's
Yeah.
good. All right. So as we wrap this up, Shay, what would you say is the Kairos, for you in this week and through this, the first week of this series?
Yeah. Um, with the new year, we've been talking a lot about, or I think this time of year lends itself to thinking about rhythms and what life looks like, what kind of ways we're regularly doing things, different practices that we have that exist. And so for me, um, looking at that and where are there like, do I have regular rhythms that help me remember the truth of who I am? And so I totally stole this from Liturgy of the Ordinary, which is a great book, highly recommend. You actually are the one that told me about it, I think, at first. But the first chapter of that, she talks about waking up and she talks about our identity in the first moment. Like when we very first open our eyes, she's great with words. So she talks about like, your bedhead and bad breath and whatever. And in that moment, the truest thing about you is still like created by God, loved by God. It's before you've buttoned up into any of your identities. And so, um, for me, I felt like that reminder, I felt like God was just like, hey, you need to have regular things where you're reminding yourself who I say you are. And so like it reminded me, I don't know if you remember one of the practices that we've been doing, and I don't remember which one it was, but in something, one guy talked about he has this habit of the first 2 minutes of every day, like he opens his eyes, he gets out of his bed and he goes outside and he spends like 2 minutes, or I don't know how many minutes, but that's like all I can handle because it's freezing. So 2 minutes outside. But he talked
You
about
might be
doing that.
exaggerating on 2 minutes yourself.
No, actually, shut up. I
You
can
should
last. I'm like bundled up.
you
Like
should clock it.
I have to bundle up.
Two
And then I'm
minutes
like,
is actually 20 seconds, but continue. Yes.
it's not true. But anyways, he does that because he talked about like the first thing in the morning, standing outside and just looking at the expanse of the sky, looking at the earth before everything's woken up, and reminding himself like both of how small he is in God's creation, but then also like we are so small and seemingly insignificant, and yet here's the identity and the truth that God speaks into us. And so, I mean, we're one day in, but this morning, the first thing I did, I've done that a little bit since we heard that. And so I think the Kairos for me is like making that part of my rhythm. So the first thing that comes into mind when I open my eyes is like, who does God say I am right now? And then I'm going to step outside and I'm going to remind myself in a really tangible way who God says that I am. And so my hope is to create a kind of a rhythm, a practice of that just where there's with regularity, I am reminding myself of who God says I am, so that I'm not putting other things in the pack.
Yeah.
So,
Man. Good.
how about for you?
Good.
Kairos.
Yeah, I would say the Kairos for me is simplistic. That oftentimes w there's a tendency to overcomplicate what it is God is inviting me into, or qualifying
Mhm.
what God's inviting me into. And so I think for me the invitation or the Kairos is simple, Devin. It's simple. I love you. God, just
Mhm.
remember, I love you. You are mine, not because of anything you have done or will do. Don't qualify it or unqualify yourself because it's something you've done in the past. And so it's that reminder that's very simple. And I attach it to like getting ready for, like a backpacking trip where you don't want to carry a lot of weight because you just have to carry it everywhere
Yeah.
you go. And um, so if you can simplify what goes into your pack, and it's the essentials,
Yeah.
it will help you get to your destination. It will help keep you warm when it's cold out. It will help nourish you on the journey. Like if you can take care of your essentials,
Yeah.
then you're set up pretty well for the journey and for the trip. And so I think the reminder, the Kairos in this week is simplify. Just simplify it. Don't
Mhm.
overcomplicate it. Don't don't add qualifiers. Uh, don't remove yourself because you don't think you're qualified
Yeah.
for whatever reason. But simply, I love you.
Yeah.
You are my beloved. And so it was like, oh, what's going in there is a piece of paper, which doesn't, it's no weight at all, but it's a
Yeah.
piece of paper that says, you're my beloved.
Yeah. Right. So good
Yeah.
stuff.
Good stuff. Well, thanks, guys, for being with us on this Beyond Sunday episode. And we look forward to what God is speaking to you in this week ahead. And then we will see you next week. Take care.